I'm Dave Butler. It's 2017. Let's look at profit and Express Scripts. The P&L on page 55 is a simple one with few line items, so let's pick some key numbers and compare margins year over year. Gross margin, that's gross profit as a percentage of revenues, rose from 8.3% in 2015 to 8.6% in 2016, suggesting success in squeezing down direct costs of products and services, or possibly walking away from unprofitable contracts. SG&A spend as a percentage of revenues improved from 4.0% in 2015 to 3.5% in 2016, suggesting tight management of the cost of running Express Scripts business. We see a spike in interest expense and other from $500.3 million to $694.8 million US dollars. Cash flow statement shows borrowing and refinancing in similar and large amounts, and balance sheet shows a modest increase in long-term debt. So this spike is probably something other than just extra interest. All of that is interesting. Now let me show you a slightly different P&L. It's on page 42, and it only comes down to PBM operating income. In other words, it doesn't come all the way down to net income. It's only a partial P&L. And you'll see the numbers are slightly different. What is this? Well, if you haven't heard it before, let me introduce you to the magic word segment. A segment of a large company is a portion of that company that is large enough that management has to describe it separately. So if you're looking at a public company's disclosure, it's usually worth searching for the word segment, just in case. In this case, that search turns up this discussion on page 41. We report segments on the basis of the products and services we offer and have determined that we have two reportable segments. Reportable means we have two. They're sufficiently large and distinctive that we need to tell you investors about them. PBM and other business operations. Our PBM segment includes our integrated PBM operations and specialty pharmacy operations. Our other business operations segment includes United BioSource and our specialty distribution operations. So the P&L on page 42 is the P&L for the PBM business only, the PBM segment. Since that accounted for $96.5 billion out of $100.3 billion of total revenue for the company, it's most of the company. And it's probably also the piece that we care more about. Let's look at some of the same numbers. Gross margin rose from 8.3% in 2015 to 8.8% in 2016, a bigger improvement. SG&A spend dropped over the same period from 4.0% of revenue to 3.6%. Not quite as good an improvement. These numbers are probably more indicative of the performance of what we think of as the Express Scripts business, in other words, the PBM. What drove the results here? It turns out we're already inside Express Scripts MD&A, which starts on page 40, so we can get some answers. Right there below the chart, we read about the declining cost of revenues, and therefore the rise of gross margin, the following. The change relates primarily to the expected roll-off of certain clients, better management of supply chain, lower claims volume from other existing clients, and an increase in the aggregate generic fill rate. None of this should be surprising, but it may give us good talking points. How much of your gross margin improvement is due to rising generic fill rate, up to 85.3% from 84.4% the prior year, as opposed to other causes? How can Novo Nordisk help you? For instance, lower claims volume to help compensate for not being priced as a generic. The discussion of SG&A spend in the paragraph immediately following identifies the big causes in reduced SG&A spend in 2016 as spikes in SG&A spending the year before. $298.8 million US dollars of transaction and integration costs, $108.1 million US dollars of additional depreciation and amortization costs relating to certain retired assets, and a $60 million legal settlement. If you subtract the identified items in that list from 2015's SG&A and run the margin again, you get 3.5%, much closer to a flatter trend. Still, you might say, hey, adjusting for those one-off costs in 2015, your SG&A spend actually increased. What does that look like in your operation? How much pressure do you get to keep that spend down, and what can I do to help? By the way, on page 44, we read that other expense we wondered about on the P&L was in fact mostly cost related to the prepayment of debt, $142.7 million. This probably wasn't a check Express Scripts had to write, rather they were probably amortizing banking fees over the life of the old loan, and when they prepaid it, they had to take all the remaining fees as a cost in 2016. Just as if a machine that wasn't fully depreciated broke, and they'd had to take all the undepreciated cost as a loss in the machine's last year.